When scapegoat survivors' diagnosis of their problem reflects the problem. Is it hard to imagine existing without feeling like there is something wrong with you? When you think about improving your quality of life, do you start by trying to fix something that seems wrong with you? And do you only see what's missing when you assess yourself? Well, a scapegoat child is forced to believe that they are undeserving and defective. They unconsciously come to these conclusions in order to be who their narcissistic parent requires them to be. These beliefs shape most of their experience with themselves and others. For example, when the scapegoat child evaluates themselves, they start with their flaws. This way of thinking cannot be challenged during childhood. Self-devaluation is necessary to protect the child's confidence in their parents' bond to them. Without that confidence, the child risks collapse into hopeless despair. Once childhood is over, a scapegoat child can challenge these damaging beliefs. The first step in challenging anything is recognition. In today's video, I discuss one way that the adult scapegoat survivor can recognize their unconscious belief that they are defective. Often the survivor's definition of the problem they want to solve reflects the problem itself. This happens, for example, when a scapegoat survivor sees themselves as damaged and in need of repair. I will explain how this strategy can also, though, be a pathway to healing. Last, I'll describe the kinds of experiences that can help you finally surrender this way of thinking. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping survivors of narcissistic abuse reclaim the quality of life that they deserve. And I'd like to let you know about a new opportunity to further your recovery from narcissistic abuse. It's called the Rise and Reclaim Healing Toolkit for Scapegoat Survivors. And in it, you'll receive my book called Growing Up as the Scapegoat Child to Narcissistic Parents, a Guide to Healing, and a worksheet that offers a structured approach to organizing your recovery process. It focuses on key areas of healing each month. Last, you'll get a quick guide to recovery from narcissistic abuse, which offers a concise, easy to follow guide that outlines the essential steps to start your recovery and regain control of your life. You can find the link to the toolkit in the description box below. Why the scapegoat child believes they are defective. The scapegoat child of a narcissistic parent may find it difficult to think about themselves without seeing what is wrong. The source of what is wrong with them can shapeshift from one moment to the next. Perhaps it is, I am so ugly, as they look in the mirror. The next moment, it may be, I am such a slacker, as they think about the homework they have yet to finish for the day. And so it goes. The content varies, but the function stays the same. The scapegoat child unconsciously understands themselves to be defective. It is how they have been forced to organize information about themselves. Well, let's look at an anonymized case example to illustrate. Terrence's father was contemptuous and hostile towards him. Whenever his father would come home from work, he would find something that Terrence should have done around the house and then erupt into a screaming fit. This started when Terrence was 4 years old. He learned to brace himself whenever his father was around. Terrence knew he was going to be scolded and humiliated. He just never knew exactly how nor when. His mother occupied herself with something else when his father would attack him. She would then act as if nothing had happened. Terrence never knew he was mistreated growing up. Sure, his father yelled at him, but he figured all parents must do that. Although he never saw his friends' parents do this, he figured they did it after he left their house. It was important to be polite to people outside the home. At least that was how his father operated, and that must be how they were operating. Terrence was much more aware that something felt inherently wrong about him. To him, it was not a feeling, it was always a fact. He had liked to paint in his third grade art class. His teacher would encourage him, but whenever Terrence looked at his own paintings, all he could see was how he could not properly paint shadows. No matter how good someone said his painting was, he knew better. They just aren't sophisticated enough to see how bad the shadowing is in this painting, he told himself. He was robbed of feeling joy and accomplishment by only seeing the defects in his work. By design, Terrence could not link the way he saw himself with the way his father devalued, deprived, and controlled him. All Terrence knew was that there was always something wrong with his abilities, choices, and actions. How belief in being defective can lead one to therapy. Well, after a childhood as a scapegoat to a narcissistic parent, the survivor may only feel real when noticing their flaws. Existing as a defective person has been so necessary for so long that noticing their adequacy can feel unreal. Scapegoat survivors who have to think this way about themselves suffer and want relief. However, when this is the only way of knowing themselves that feels real, finding relief becomes a challenge. Nonetheless, a survivor's claim that they are defective can lead them to what they need to recover. Survivors may enter therapy believing that they are flawed and in need of repair. They may see therapy as the place where such repair happens. In this way, the scapegoat survivor is still complying with the belief that they are defective, while also trying to find a relationship where this belief may no longer be necessary. And this logic typically occurs unconsciously. In therapist intake assessments, clients are often asked to write down their goals for therapy. And sometimes clients' stated goals may comply with the belief that they are defective. Clients who identify the problem as a defect or deficit in themselves, for example, I want to learn to communicate better, or I want to be more empathic to the needs of others, or I want to be less selfish. These folks may be complying with such an underlying belief. In such cases, though, a good therapist will stay curious and inquire further about these goals. As the therapy begins and clients start to feel understood and accepted, they may grow to feel safe to reformulate their goals. So the client who initially wanted to be less selfish may restate their goal to getting out of relationships with people who accuse them of being selfish. Well, let's go back to the case of Terrence. He came to therapy at age 24 because he was unsatisfied with his life. He worked hard at his job as a construction foreman, but could only pursue activities outside work that helped him fix his supposed flaws. He worked out at the gym to fix what he perceived to be his unsightly body. He read books at night to combat his feeling that he was not an intelligent person. It was impossible for him to know how to do what he actually wanted to do. That was never something he had allowed himself to do. Terrence lived alone and had a few friends. He dated women, but had never had a long-term partner. He found it difficult to get close to others. Something in him would seize up, and he would feel like he was walking a tightrope. Say or do the wrong thing, and they would reject him in a heartbeat, he thought. He grew exhausted often after being with others. Before his first session, he completed his therapist intake form. When asked to list 3 goals he had for his therapy, he wrote, first, I want to accept my flaws. Next, I want to learn to be a better friend. And third, I want to understand the negative ways I impact people. His therapist noted to himself how centered these goals were on Terrence's supposed deficits or defects. Terrence's stated mission for therapy seemed to start with the assumption that he was broken and needed fixing. In their first session, his therapist asked Terrence what he might find most helpful in their work together. Terrence said, well, I don't want you to pull any punches with me. Just tell me like it is so I can know what I need to do to get better. His therapist said, I see, Terrence. Well, I don't plan on throwing punches in here with you. Terrence was taken aback, but felt an immediate release of tension in his body. He saw in that moment how prepared he was to be told that he was bad or wrong, and how much this contrasted with his therapist's attitude towards him. Being close to someone without them throwing punches at him? What a novel concept. Seeing yourself through a new lens in therapy. Well, there are not a lot of certainties in the business of psychotherapy, but here's one. Nobody can surrender the belief that they are defective in isolation. This has to be done in a new relationship with someone who makes it safe to discover that such beliefs are false and unnecessary. Safe in this regard means that the relationship will not be threatened if these beliefs are defied. Therapy is not the only way to accomplish this, but it is a viable option. In my work with scapegoat survivors, I have found that they can challenge the belief in their defectiveness once a strong therapeutic relationship has been established. From the standpoint of the therapy I practice, called control mastery theory, clients have unconscious yet strategic ways to establish such a relationship. They will often act as though they are defective to see how the therapist reacts. If the therapist responds in ways that refute their assumption, then the client will feel safer in the therapy. They know that this therapist does not need them to feel defective to be close to them. As more and more of these instances accrue, the client grows willing to identify and challenge how such beliefs operate in their lives. Let's see how this played out with Terrence. He and his therapist established a rhythm in their sessions. Terrence would typically begin talking about an interaction with his friends or at work in which he felt inadequate. His therapist would then comment or ask a question to bring Terrence's attention to something he found hard to consider, that others found him to be a quite adequate person. Terrence also found it hard to consider that others would not just be evaluating his fitness to be their friend, but their own fitness to be his friend. It was novel, yet welcome, to consider that others saw value in the friendship he had to offer them. Here's how this process unfolded in their 15th session. Terrence said, "I have a friend at work named Steve who seems really cool. We joke around a lot and he has some interesting viewpoints." His therapist said, "It sounds like you're excited about him and the possibility of a growing friendship." Terrence said, "Yeah, I guess so. But I don't want to appear too eager. It seems like I always do that and people get turned off." His therapist replied, "Can you tell me about some times when this has actually happened?" Terrence said, "Well, I guess not really. Well, I guess I don't really extend myself. That's how I end up avoiding rejection." His therapist said, "I see. This seems like something you sort of know in your bones, but this knowledge contrasts with your actual experience in the world. And that can be an important divergence." Terrence said, "You're right, but it still feels scary to think of inviting Steve to do something outside of work hours." His therapist said, "Yeah, those feelings that he'll find you defective can be pretty convincing. I wonder, do you anticipate that he'll react to you the same way your father did?" Terrence said, "Well, yeah. I mean, this feeling has been around for so long. It's hard to imagine living without it." And his therapist said, "I bet. I wonder if that possibility feels disorienting." And Terrence exclaimed, "Big time. Like, who would I be if there wasn't something wrong with me?" And his therapist said, "An important question for sure." Well, after this session, Terrence did go ahead and ask Steve if he wanted to get a beer after work on Friday, and Steve enthusiastically said yes. Well, if you're a scapegoat survivor and you've noticed that a sort of theme of there being something wrong with you can kind of work its way into your thinking in all sort of subtle and not even hard to catch ways, then I hope today's video was of some help in maybe shedding light on why that is, or can, one reason it can be, but also how that can gradually change, in new relationships where you get to discover it's safe to surrender that sort of survival tactic. And again, the process of surrendering happens very gradually and incrementally. Um, well, I want to thank you all for watching today's video, and again, your support of this channel, and the other videos on it, and the resources that surround it. And again, I always want to thank everyone for your the community that's established in the comments section, the extensions to one another, and the thoughtful questions and additions to, I think, the content of the videos that so many contribute. And yeah, I hope everyone is having a safe holiday season, and look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.